Freddie Mercury died, the Gulf War was raging, unemployment was over 2 million, and Bryan Adams was top of the pops with his sort of horrible ballad about Robin Hood. Yes, 4 terrible events that happened in 1991 in the United Kingdom, but it was not all doom and gloom in that year. No, it was not. Why? Well, because the band I'm going to be mainly talking about today released a masterpiece of an LP in that year. I won't say the name of it yet because we're going to get to it later, but I'm pretty sure you'll know what I'm talking about when I tell you that the main attraction this evening is the mighty Leatherface from Sunderland, Great Britain. What a great band they were, weren't they? Now, I sort of did go and see them a few times back. What would have been the very early 90s when I saw them, mostly. When some might say they were sort of at their peak at that time, but who knows. But anyway, for me, I saw them a few times in the early 90s, and two times sort of stick out in my mind. And the first one was they played at this sort of alternative disco. There's a lot of them, wasn't there, back in the day. We sort of had a normal nightclub that would sort of play normal music, and then maybe once a week, could be a weekday, could be a weekend, they sort of have an alternative disco, and often they get a good band to come and play. Now, this place was in my town called Bath, where I was living, and the club was called Fusion, and they had a sort of alternative night, alternative disco. And I saw a lot of good bands. I really did. I saw the God Machine, that band, amazing band. That was quite an amazing show, and the Action Swingers, loads of bands. But Leatherface, they played there on a weekday night, I think it was. But we were sort of all unemployed, so we sort of went along. And I think it was just before Mush came out, because I remember sort of quite clearly sort of drunkenly singing along to songs I had never heard before, especially sort of not superstitious. I was sort of wow along to it, and I hadn't got a clue what Frankie was singing, but it really sort of hit me, and that's the sort of mark of a great song, a great band, isn't it? You find yourself singing along on your sort of first ever listen. And they sort of stayed at our punky squat that night, but honestly, I think Frankie might have slept in the van that night, and the other lads sort of maybe stayed in the living room, but I think I just sort of went to bed. I was a bit tipsy, I think, and I sort of didn't get to talk with the lads very much that night. Bit of a shame. But the next time I saw, maybe not the next time, but the other time I want to talk about was at the Snuff's first farewell gig in London at the Kilburn National Ballroom. And look, I've got a little fly here. I sort of found it on the internet. It's from a Japanese fanzine called Shaken Street, but you can see the lineup there, can't you? Snuff headlining, Leatherface, Wat Tyler, and Midway Still also played, and also I'm pretty sure the Senseless Things played too. There's a lot of great sort of melodic bands in England in those days, sort of real breath of fresh air, especially for me. Sort of top 3: Leatherface, Snuff, what a band they were, and Mega City 4, very sort of British sounding trio of bands that were sort of very melodic but had their own sort of thing going on, not too Americanish, very sort of British. Anyway, I sort of went all the way up to London to see that Snuff gig, and Leatherface supported, and it was huge. It was about sort of 5,000 people there, and there's a YouTube video of it on YouTube, and I think the sort of Snuff live album from that time was recorded at that gig anyway. But that was sort of very memorable time that I went to see Leatherface back in 1991. It was 1991, so it was the year that sort of Mush came out as well, and the year that Bryan Adams was sort of singing his horrible song in everyone's faces. But let's not talk about that anymore. Now, what else was I going to say? Yes, a lot of melodic bands. saw Leatherface quite a few times, and well, I suppose it's time to get to the records, isn't there? Now, they did put out a lot of 7-inch singles, didn't they? Leatherface. I sort of don't have any of them at the moment, but so we'll just sort of go through the old studio albums there, and there's quite a few sort of little bonus offshoots that we can sort of take a look at. I'm quite excited about that. So let's start at the beginning. Of course, 1989, Meantime Records, a little label from Darlington up north. They sort of unleashed this record. First LP from Leatherface, Cherry Knoll, probably their sort of rawest, most hardcore punk record, wasn't it? And it sort of came out of nowhere. I'd never heard of them, and all of a sudden this sort of appeared in my local shop. Sort of looked good. I bought it home, took it home, put it on, loved it. Of course, it does sort of sound a bit like Motorhead. People sort of say, well, Leatherface, a mixture of Husker Du and Motorhead. Bit of a sort of lazy comparison, but might be true. And great. A lot of people sort of don't really rank this record maybe too highly. Me, I love it. I think it's a great record. So many good songs. Animal Days, classic. Discipline, Cabbage Case, and this is when they sort of first started. So Leatherface did a lot of cover versions, didn't they? And this one, on their debut, they did Ghetto by Elvis the King, Aaron, Elvis Presley. They did a cover of that, and they did a lot of cover versions, didn't they, in their career? Message in a Bottle by The Police, and Eagle by ABBA. That's one of my favourites. But I think sort of really good sign of a band that they can sort of do any cover version that they want and sort of make it their own. And Snuff sort of did that to maybe a bit lesser effect. I think Leatherface was sort of the masters of the cover version, but great record. Raw sounding, sort of more hardcore punk, very Motorhead-ish. Great debut. Of course, Cherry Knoll, didn't know what it meant at first, but sort of found out later that it was a sort of it was an asylum, wasn't it? That's sort of a mental asylum is sort of what they called it, and it was quite a landmark, I think, in Sunderland at the time. It's been sort of, it's not being used now, but there are some photos of it on the internet. It's sort of quite a haunting place. So have a little Google of Cherry Knoll in Sunderland and sort of see what a frightening place that was. And you could sort of see probably the artwork there is sort of depicting Cherry Knoll, isn't it? So great debut from 1989 on Meantime Records, who put out a lot of great records, didn't they? Soaphead and blah, this, that, and the other, but good label and a great record. Now, next, let's move to 1990. Now, in 1990, the lads, they sort of put out two 12-inch singles, or sort of mini LPs, if you like. Now, the first one, well, it was recorded in March, so I think it came out first. Smokey Joe was the name of the record. 5-song, 5-track record. Again, another cover version, Ideal World, by the sort of quite wishy-washy pop band, the Christians, but Leatherface sort of beefed it up, made it their own. And yeah, it's a good record, produced by sort of old Ian Burgess, quite famous producer, and they'd already moved on to Roughneck Records, a much sort of bigger label. It's an offshoot, a subsidiary of Fire Records, wasn't it? And they've got sort of rough trade distribution and everything. It's a good record, but in the same year they also put out this one, and for me this is sort of really the start or the shape of things to come, wasn't it? Fill Your Boots, Leatherface, 8-track sort of mini LP with it just starts off with New York State and goes bang straight into Razor Blades and Aspirin, which is sort of one of the most devastating songs. Now, what I want to say about these two is there's a difference, isn't there, between Smokey Joe and Fill Your Boots. Now, that difference is Dickie Hammond. So Dickie, he played guitar on this, didn't he? And it sort of really lifts the record and sort of changes the whole sound of the record with his sort of amazing chiming, chugging guitar work on this record. So for me, this sort of trounces Smokey Joe, even though they were sort of both from the same year. And of course, Dickie, he sort of passed away didn't he, in 2015, age 50. It was very, very sad. It was sort of our or my generation, so it's very sad that he sort of died so young. There's a lot of sort of tributes to him online. It's quite a nice one from the Guardian. The Guardian, they're sort of, I've noticed the Guardian, they've sort of almost taken the place of sort of Sounds and NME. They do sort of quite a lot of reviews that you can't find anywhere else, maybe unless sort of Pitchfork, and they do actually do some quite good stuff in their sort of music section. But what James McMahon, he wrote in the Guardian on when did he write it? The 6th of November, Friday, 2015. And it says, melancholia and raw pain, the sad end of Leatherface. And it says the death of guitarist Dickie Hammond this week could result in the demise of the greatest British punk band of the modern era. And well, that's very true, isn't it? And of course, if you like Dickie's great guitar work, you probably sort of already know that he sort of did play in a lot of other really great bands. Of course, one of the bands I'm talking about is HDQ, Hung, Drawn and Quartered, also from Sunderland, put out quite a few records. This one is on, this is on German label, on Dissidents, but it was on Positive Records, wasn't it? I think, which is Andy from The Instigators. I think that was sort of his label. This is the German pressing for some reason, but great record, great sort of melodic. HDQ sort of very American influence, weren't they? I'm pretty sure they sort of loved Dag Nasty. That was a big influence on HDQ, but great record. But for me, the Peel sessions, as an HDQ Peel session, which is absolutely incredible, and it really sort of shows off Dickie's sort of great guitar work. So if you haven't heard the Peel sessions, it's probably on YouTube somewhere. And sort of Golly, who's a singer of HDQ and Dickie, they have quite a few bands that maybe sort of only put out one CD or one EP. I sort of forget some of the names now. I should have looked that. But this one, the Jones, Gravity Blues, full-length LP that was put out on Boss Tunage. Sort of very HDQ-ish sort of sounding record, a bit under the radar maybe. So if you sort of love HDQ and you sort of want to explore, sort of go even deeper, then, and you haven't heard this, then yeah, I think this record by the Jones, Gravity Blues, is well worth a little listen. But my favourite one that isn't HDQ and sort of features Dickie is this one. Now this is such a good record, such a good band, Dr. Bison. Have you heard Dr. Bison? If you haven't heard Dr. Bison, do check them out, especially this one, because again, the great sort of Boss Tunage. They put out a couple of sort of compilations, I suppose they aren't they, of Dr. Bison sort of 7 inches and demo tapes and everything. But this has got two of the blokes from the Abs, like the old sort of work from Newport, Wales, sort of melodic punk band. I saw them a few times. They're a sort of a fun band to see, like. But it's got the singer of them. He's got a great voice, amazing voice, and the songs are incredible. Melodic punk, catchy, great choruses. The production's a bit sort of raw because it's from demo tapes and stuff. But seriously, if you haven't heard Dr. Bison, do give this one a listen. It's absolutely fantastic. There's a sort of nice picture of Dickie on the back there in the middle. So Dr. Bison, do check him out if you like Dickie's guitar work. Anyway, back to Leatherface, and yes, where I started, 1991, and Leatherface put out their absolute sort of masterpiece. Yes, of course, I've said it once anyway, but of course I'm talking about the unbelievable Mush LP, again on Roughneck. Now this is one of these records, it's perfect, isn't it, sort of from start to finish, and the production's just spot on. It's a big sound, but it's not too polished. See, look at that track list, and you know, if you're sort of familiar with this record, you're sort of thinking, yeah, brilliant, yeah, masterpiece, classic, Ripper, Rager, or Mid-Paced Roger, amazing, fantastic, all lovely stuff. Just from sort of start to finish, it's just one of those sort of classic records, like Poison Idea, Feel Your Darkness, or Motorhead, Ace of Spades is just perfect from start to finish. And I suppose a bit of funny story about this. When I was living in the squat, I was sort of talking about just now, we were sort of getting drunk in the daytime, and this record had just come out, and there was a sort of whole bunch of us sort of drinking at sort of 11 o'clock on a Wednesday morning or something, and one of the blokes there, he sort of got a bit frisky, and he stamped and he stood on me brand new copy of Mush, and he broke it, sort of broke in half. And I was sort of young then and a bit tipsy and a bit sort of frisky, and I sort of said to him, "Oi, you go down the shop and get me a new copy." And he did, and he sort of rushed off, and he went down the shop, and he sort of came back and he said, "Here you go, I'm very sorry," and he sort of gave me another copy. Now you couldn't do that these days, could you? You sort of couldn't go sort of just sort of nip down the shop and get me a sort of a Leatherface record. That probably wouldn't happen these days, would it? But it's quite easy in those days. Things have changed, haven't they? But masterpiece, one of the best punk records of all time, one of the best records of all time, any genre. If you've been living under a rock for 35 years, come out of your rock and go and pick some mushrooms and give this a listen. It might just change your life. Springtime, check out the lyrics to that. There's a little bit of springtime in the back of my mind. Very emotional, uplifting song. Fantastic. From 1991, as I just said. Now there was a little bit of a break then, wasn't there? 2 years. They didn't put out anything. They sort of came back with the next record, which is this one, Minks. Now, for me, this is a bit of an Ace of Spades, Iron Fist kind of situation going on there. What do I mean? Well, what I mean is, at the time, it sort of seemed like a bit of a step down. It wasn't quite as good as Mush, but in retrospect, it takes a little bit more work to sort of let this record sort of seep into your skin, and it's a classic album. Again, it's fantastic, and it's also got one of my favourite Leatherface songs of all time. Of course, talking about the last song, they sort of saved the best for last on this one, Pale Moonlight. So that is as good as any song on Mush. So Leatherface, Pale Moonlight. It's got other great songs, Books, Wallflower, and I really like, there's a song called Dustbin Modo, and it's got this really ripping guitar solo in the middle of it. I'm sort of quite a big fan of that. But great record. Maybe it's best not to sort of compare them too much, because, you know, it's a bit unfair, isn't it? But also another classic from Leatherface, again on Roughneck Records from 1992. Check it out, Chokey. And then there was there's a 1 year gap again, and then they sort of came back with this one called The Last, and they'd moved to Domino Records, now another sort of big sort of independent label. Bit of a shorter record, only 8 songs. It's got Shipyards and Win Some, Lose Some, Snuff, and Little White God is a sort of great song too. And but again, I can't help sort of feeling it was a little bit of a sort of step down from Minks, wasn't it? Maybe. What do you think? Let me know. Let's have a little chat about it down in the comments. But I like the artwork. People sort of often say, "Oh, Leatherface, sort of terrible artwork," and maybe it is terrible, but I like it. And then sort of on the front, the sort of dog is big and the boy is small, but when you sort of turn it over, the boy is big and the dog is small. Very clever. But again, worth checking out. The Leatherface, The Last, on Domino Records, distributed by Pinnacle from 1994. And then it was quiet, wasn't it? Maybe did they break up? Did they? They might have done. It's called The Last, isn't it? Because they didn't sort of do anything for about 5 years. And then in 1999, they came back and did a sort of very strange thing. They came out with a one-sided record on BYO Records out of the United States of America, of course run by the Stern brothers of Youth Brigade. But this has got a couple of Leatherface's incredible songs. I'm talking about Andy, which was dedicated to Andy Crichton, wasn't it? And of course, Deep Green Beautiful Leveling. So two of Leatherface's greatest songs are sort of hidden away on this one-sided record from 1999. Now, the production's good on it too. What's the name of that bloke who was a sort of, there it is, it's on the back here. In fact, he wrote sort of the entire liner notes. It's called, it's Jack Rabbit, isn't it? Rabbit. From the Big Takeover fanzine, New York, sort of maybe the biggest Leatherface fan in the world, and he's written some really amazing liner notes on the back, which really, if I just sort of read this out, I could sort of have done this whole episode without having to think, but I didn't do that. But if you sort of see this record, it's definitely worth, make sure you sort of read the liner notes on the back and listen to, especially Andy. What a great emotional song. And Deep Green Beautiful Leveling, great, one of the best one-sided records of all time. Then another year sort of went by, they came back and they did two records in 2000 and 2004. Both unfortunately didn't have Dickie playing on, but they're both very, very solid records indeed. Of course, I'm talking about Horsebox, which came out again on BYO Records. Now this, I've got to be honest with you, it's worth being honest, isn't it? This is sort of, this one and the next one that comes after this, Dog Disco, are the two Leatherface records I've sort of spent the least time with in me life. But I spent a few hours last week sort of catching up, refreshing my memory, and this is a really, really great record. It's got a great, I was talking about the sort of cover versions, it's got a great cover version of Cyndi Lauper's True Colours on it, and Ship Song, it's a Nick Cave song, isn't it? Great songs. Evo Pop's great song, Watching You Sleep, great song. And the last one, again, they sometimes like to save sort of the killer track to the last. Box Jellyfish, that's another sort of great song. I think on this record they sort of not toned it down, but it was sort of more melodic, maybe a little bit darker feel to the record. But nevertheless, you can't knock it. It's definitely worth having a look in the old Horsebox. I love the record, the sort of artwork on this too. I think it's really good. I don't know why people sort of knock Leatherface's artwork. Well, maybe I do, because let's have a little look at Dog Disco from 2004. What do you make of that? The sort of mirror ball with the dog with his sunglasses on the cover and sort of on the back as well. But as I sort of just said, I sort of spent a bit of time last week with this one and Horsebox, and I think, to be honest with you, out of the two, I think I sort of prefer this one. I think overall it's sort of a better album, and I like the production on it a little bit more. So I definitely did have a good time listening to this record last week. But yeah, 2004, Dog Disco, what is there to say about it? I don't know. Small Yellow Chair, it's a great song. Diddley Squat, Hoodlum, first track's great. I like the production, but as I just said, Dickie doesn't play on it, so it's sort of not. I know it sounds sort of a bit cheeky, but it doesn't quite sound the same to me with sort of Dickie's amazing sort of guitar playing and his songwriting, because he was a good songwriter too. So it's always nice to have Dickie's sort of songwriting. I think Dickie Hammond and Stubbs sort of better than Lennon and McCartney, aren't they? Yes, they are. I've just said it. Wow. See, Leatherface, they don't have a huge discography, do they? And in 2010, they sort of came out with what would be their sort of their final LP, I suppose. And to me, they sort of knocked it out of the park with this record. I think this, is it okay to say that this is my sort of second favourite Leatherface record after Mush. It is okay, isn't it? Because it really is fantastic. God is Dead sort of starts off a little bit slower paced. My World's End, fantastic song. Never Say Goodbye. Oh, I love that song. It's one of Leatherface's sort of best songs of all time. And then on the flip side, Diego Garcia, what a great song. I love this record, and this came out on No Idea Records, and they did sort of tons of sort of pressing variations, didn't they? Sort of green vinyl, blue vinyl, a double record on 45. This is sort of a green vinyl repress, only 200 made. And I like the picture on the back of this, because do you remember on the song Dead Industrial Atmosphere? It's the last song on Mush, isn't it? There's that line, it says something like, the air in here smells like religion and Voxy's beer, which I think Voxy's beer was sort of a local brew in Sunderland. You can see they've got a picture of the pub there with Vox, what does it say? Vox Breweries Limited. That's sort of quite a nice touch, isn't it? To sort of go back to the sort of Voxy's beer or Vox's beer on the stormy patch. If you haven't heard this, if you sort of gave up on Leatherface, don't give up. Do the right thing and check this one out. It's absolutely magnificent. It's a wonderful record, so please do investigate. Now, if you're a Frankie fan, you probably already know that he did a couple of records that are sort of, they're almost Leatherface, aren't they? And but they both sort of came out on Rugger Bugger Records from London, run by that cheeky chap Sean from Wat Tyler. One of the bands was called Pope. This came out in 1994, so I suppose this came out the same year as the last album by Leatherface. And it's got Andy Crichton on bass, which is of course the song Andy was dedicated to this Andy, wasn't it? And Frankie on vocal and guitar, and Chris McIntosh on the drums. So this record, Pope, I love the title as well, John, Paul, George, Ringo. So quite fun, isn't it? So I was just talking about Paul McCartney. And so this one, Pope, and this one, Jesse. Yes, this one is also on Rugger Bugger, as I just said. Leighton Evans on the bass, Peter Shield on the drums, and of course Frankie Stubbs on guitar and singing. Now this one, Jesse, and this one, Pope, are sort of like, they sort of are missing, or sort of missing Leatherface records, aren't they? They're sort of very similar to Leatherface. So if you're a Leatherface or Frankie Stubbs completist and you haven't heard Jesse or Pope, do give those records a listen. They're a bit hard to find on vinyl. I don't think old Rugger Bugger pressed too many, but you can probably listen to them in some way. Well, that's it. Went by quite quickly, didn't it? Another half an hour sort of gone by, but we love the older early 90s, late 80s British melodic punk. We're big fans, aren't we? With Leatherface, Mega City 4, Senseless Things, Stupids, HDQ, Visions of Change. There's hundreds of bands. I'm forgetting a lot of them. But it was a really good time because it was sort of a breath of fresh air, sort of in contrast to all the sort of crust, which I also like. I love Doom, I love Extreme Noise Terror, I love all those bands. I've done an episode about sort of some of those bands before, but it's a real nice sort of contrast to that scene as well. So we're very thankful to all those great bands from England from the late 80s and early 90s. Big respect to all of them. So until next time, I'm hoping that next week I'm going to be talking to Mike 9 Williams of I Hate God. Fingers crossed it's gonna happen. So please try and look forward to that. But until next time, stay healthy and stay clean.